If you can see my slide deck, it's just a little agenda. So we've just finished the introduction. We will talk a little bit more about NetStock as a business during the slides that I go through just to set the scene. We're going to spend most of the time in the NetStock application. Then there'll be a session just for a QA. And then BrightBridge have twisted my arm. We'll talk about a little offer that we've agreed with them right at the end. But if we move on through, so I'm going to give you an introduction to NetStock, which is inventory optimization in the cloud. And just by way of our Earth, everywhere you see a country that's red means that we've got at least one customer there. And our aim is to make our planet look like Mars. We want to conquer the world and be the real leader in the inventory optimization space, which we're nicely on our way to, but we've still got a way to go. Just some demographics. So we've been around since 2011. We've got more than 2,000 customers globally. And if big data turns you on, we're forecasting on a monthly basis, planning on a daily basis, more than 90 million item location records, which is a pretty scary number. And we can scale too. Our biggest customer has 8 million item location records, and we plan that for them every night in 4.5 hours. Across those businesses, we're helping them optimize in excess of 15 billion pounds worth of inventory, another scary number. And for some time now, we enjoy more than 18,000 users logging in on a daily basis. And of course, what that means is on any browser, on any device, anywhere that there's an internet connection. And we're a seasoned team, and we can boast more than 430 man-years of inventory optimization experience. So not a lot of nuances out there that we can't at least give a very considered answer to, but often a solution to as well. And let me introduce you to a common prospect of ours. So people come to us looking for solutions to the following things. So typically they've got too much of the wrong inventory, too little of the right inventory. They're trying to do forecasting and planning in Excel, which is not only difficult, time consuming, it's also very risky, right? Because Google reckons that 88% of all spreadsheets have an error in them, affecting what the spreadsheet's trying to deliver. And because he's using Excel to do a lot of his planning and coming up with numbers, he's treating many items similarly from a reorder point perspective. But when you consider each individual item in each warehouse, the inventory risk is unique to that item and a function of the supplier risk. How well does the supplier deliver the product in terms of time and quantity? But also the demand risk. How volatile is that demand? How predictable is it? What is the forecast accuracy and the bias of that accuracy? And this is where inventory optimization comes in, by measuring those for every item in every warehouse and making them an input into the safety stock calculation and therefore the reorder points. Now, because this guy can't really do that, it means that some of those reorder points are too high and others not high enough. And all of that boils down to not really having a sufficient time to do value-added tasks. So a typical basket of things to try and solve, and in so doing, we deliver some benefits. So typically, our customers enjoy a reduction in inventory, which of course releases working capital back into the business to spend on other things. And with the economy and inflation rates as they are, you know, it's free money to be able to do that. But at the same time, an improvement in off-the-shelf availability. So a double whammy really from a return on investment perspective, being able to sell more with investing less. And they're the two biggest inputs to return on investment. But it's really interesting because it's not those that are the usual reason for our prospects moving forward. It's because all of those perpetual spreadsheet calculations, they disappear because we do those calculations whilst you're tucked up in bed asleep. And we deliver those benefits by addressing a couple of key questions, really. The top one, the simpler one of the two, if you like, but a lot of science built in, is what do we need to replenish today? And when I mean replenish, that might be purchase, it might be manufacture, it might be transfer from one location to another. So today and over time, to keep you at your optimal inventory levels. The second question, that's a bit more involved. That gets its arms around items where you might have too much in stock, items where you may or may not have too much in stock, but you got too much on order, items that should be in stock today, but are stocked out, items that are in stock today, but they're going to stock out between now and the next delivery. So a potential stock out. We've also got in the application a tournament-based statistical forecasting engine, a number of different algorithms, and we pick the best fit one of those for each item in each warehouse each month. And you can make amendments to those forecasts both at a macro level, all of the items in an item grouping, all of the items from a particular supplier, and blow those forecasts down onto the items that make up that group. And of course, you can make amendments at an individual item level as well. So some nice functionality, but this slide really represents the day in the life of a planner using NetStock. There's lots of other important parts of the jigsaw puzzle, and I'll show you some of those when we get into the application. But these are the things that people are doing on a daily basis. Just how we hang together with NetSuite is we've got a couple of bundles. The first one adds 3 custom fields into NetSuite because we need some data that there isn't a standard repository for, and another bundle of save searches to pump all of the data out of NetSuite that we need, and then that goes up through a connector to our server in the cloud, which kicks off a refresh of the application and drives a number of things. All of the functionality I'm going to show you. You can interface with those recommended manufacturing orders, purchase orders, transfer orders, and when you download them from NetStock, they hit the NetSuite API and create the appropriate transaction into NetSuite, closing the loop, if you like. Now, I want to go back to what we were talking about in terms of, applying blanket reorder triggers, treating many items similarly, and the difference that optimization is compared to that. And we've got some slides that help do that visually. So this is the common approach. So imagine those peaks there as individual items, and the size of the peak is related to the inventory risk, the combination of the supplier risk and the demand risk. And you can see some of them are bigger than others. Now imagine them as rocks in a lake. And what lots of businesses do, they pour water in until they're comfortable with the amount of rock still showing. Okay, so that's a common approach. But look at all of this water, right? Some of it isn't required. Now the difference, when you start measuring those risks, now imagine them as mountains in a mountain range. And depending on the inventory risk, we're calculating the amount of snow that needs to be on top of those mountains to deliver on the desired service that you want to for that particular item. So now you can easily spot that in terms of the amount of water, this being frozen, and that lake, that is why typically inventory optimization reduces inventory by somewhere between 15 to 20%. We've got customers much bigger than that. We've got customers than less, but this is typical. And then what you can do is you can start trying to manage those risks. Work with your suppliers that are costing you more money in your safety stock because they're very poor suppliers. And if you can improve that, because we're continually measuring those inventory risks, if that supplier performance starts improving, then the safety stock calculation will track that. and become smaller. If it gets worse, the reverse is true. Similarly, the demand volatility, the forecast accuracy, and the bias of the accuracy, if that improves or gets worse, we're continually tracking that and we're modifying the safety stock appropriately. But understanding those risks and managing them leads to a further reduction in the amount of snow that we need to protect your service to your customers. So that hopefully that sort of gives you an idea of the different approaches between many businesses and inventory optimization. But what we're going to do now is we're going to see some of that in action. So I'm just going to pop out of the presentation for now. And what I thought I'd do is before I start giving you some general looks around the functionality in NetStock, I'll look at two particular items. Now, if we look at this particular item, hopefully you can see NetStock now. We will look at this in a bit more detail, but what I want to draw your attention to is this item is from this particular supplier. Over here, we can see the agreed lead time with this supplier is 7 days. We can see the desired service level. So it's set at pretty high, very important item, and we want to guarantee very good service to the supplier. Now, what we're doing down here is we're taking a starting amount of safety stock and we're applying those measures. And you can see that on this particular item, we've added some extra safety stock into the calculation because there is a tendency, excuse me, my voice is going. There is a tendency for the demand to be greater than forecast. So we've added another 2 days of safety stock into the mix. We've also looking at the supplier risk. And here, it's not supplied particularly well. And just to see that, we can look at the supplier performance, and we can see this is the planning lead time, and we can see all of the, we could get a table of all of the deliveries, right? But on this graph, we can see there is a tendency for the deliveries to be late, but also there's some that are delivered short as well. So analyzing this is why we're adding that extra buffer because of the supplier risk. And if we look at another item, you can see it's from exactly the same supplier. It's on exactly the same lead time, but this time there is also a similar demand volatility, and typically the demand is greater, so we've also buffered that. But in this case, we're not adding or subtracting some days of safety stock. Why? Because the performance is much better. You know, the average is around the planning lead time, and they're always delivering in full, which means that the supplier risk on this particular item is lower, and the amount of snow that you need on this item is 7 days worth of demand, and on this item 13 days worth of demand. So hopefully that illustrates in the application the concept that we were talking about in terms of measuring the inventory risk and applying the appropriate amount of snow. So those were two specific items. What I want to do now is just take you through some of the key pieces of the NetStock jigsaw puzzle. And one that is very intrinsic, pretty much something that you set up at the beginning, you might tweak over time, but it's what we call item classification. And every one of the businesses here, I'm sure they're aware that they've got some items that are more important to the business than others. And you may or may not be doing some item classification at the moment, but item classification is very intrinsic in NetStock. So this is a particular warehouse, and in this database we've got 3 warehouses. So classification occurs in each of those warehouses, And if we click on this little eye here, you can see the out-of-box rules that we're doing for this part of the classification. So based on the next 12 months of forecast, or bill of material demand if it's a component, that kind of thing, multiplied by the inventory cost price. The A items are those that make up 80% of the total, B items the next 16, C items the remaining 4. Now, you can drive it based on history if you would rather, although I don't particularly advocate for that, because it's a bit like driving your car forwards just by using your rear view mirror. You can multiply it by the average selling price or the margin, if that makes more sense, and you can vary those percentages. But in this database, we can now see the number of A-class items, 7% of the total. We can see the stock value and percentage, some demand information, even days and turns of inventory. I could even get a listing of those A-class items, and I could further filter, I could sort it, I could download all of the listings that you find in NetStock behave in that manner. But then we've got B-class items, and usually the number starts ramping up, and send C-class items, they are the tail. These are your stocked items. Then we've got another couple of classifications. So what a non-stocked item is one when we only recommend replenishment when the firm demand in the lead time is greater than stock plus on order. So that's a make to order, purchase to order, transfer to order type setting, if you will. And then obsolete, we don't recommend replenishment, but it is useful having dead items through into NetStock for 2 reasons. The first one, if they're part of a supersession chain, because in that case we can use the historic data to drive 2 lots of supersession functionality in NetStock. We can forecast the sales of the new item based on the history of the old, for example. Another good reason for having dead items through into NetStock is if they are dead, but there's remaining inventory on them for visibility. Now, this is quite a common approach to classification, but what you can have is very important high running items that, because they're so relatively cheap in the range, become a B or a C class as a consequence. So to mitigate against that, we do the same analysis again, but this time just based on units. No fiscal input to this part of the classification to give us like a velocity rating, high, medium, and low runners. And having done both sets of analysis, we put them together in this 2-dimensional matrix where we plot ABC down the left, low, medium, and high across the top. So these are pretty important items to the business, right? We've colored that classification green. We also consider the items in these 2 classifications as well as those that make up the bread and butter items of the business. And then these down here are the tail, maybe candidates for rationalizing out of the stock range, depending on how well you're sweating the inventory on them. And it being, an inventory optimization specific application, we can do some clever stuff. We can see where the population of the number of items are. We can see where your inventory investment is. In a well-balanced warehouse, you'd expect those green towers to be the bigger ones, right? But look how big C low is, particularly now where we compare it to where the demand is. So that straight away suggests to me in this database, a lot of these C low items will be a lot of the ones that have the thickest dust on in your warehouse. But we don't need suggestions because we can actually see where your excess inventory is. I was right in that suggestion. It is predominantly in that C low section. So great analysis for all of our customers. But I told you that it was very important. 2 reasons we do it. And the first one is very obvious. It is important. If you come in the morning and you have a stock out on an A high item, stock out on a C low item, you're going to tackle this one first, right? But the second reason that we do this, in my mind, is more important still. And that is because this forms the starting point, but you can override them right the way down to an individual item level. It's the starting point for applying the policy parameters, of which there are 2. The first one is the desired service level that you want to deliver to your customers, expressed as a target fill rate. And obviously, the higher you set that target fill rate, the more safety stock is calculated to buffer that item's supply risk and demand risk. And then the other policy parameters, what we call the replenishment cycle, the frequency with which you order them. But why we think this is so important is it's basically establishing your inventory strategy. What level of service do you want to be able to provide to your customers? And therefore, we can tell you how much inventory you should have on the shelf on average, expressed as this model stock. And it would be very interesting to see what your model stock is compared to where you are at the moment. So that's classification. And another place that you can see the model stock in NetStock is on our dashboard. And the dashboard's multifaceted. It's a combination of these KPIs at the top and focus to-do lists in each section. So this is a slightly different database. In here, there's many more different warehouses. There's also the ability to add what we call a region, which is the aggregation of real warehouses added together. And in this database happens to be a total group level. I'm not going to deep dive this on here, but basically these items are that excess piece that we just looked at before. The opening stock is greater than our calculated max. And we can see the total problem. If you've only got time to deal with 5 items, let's make sure you're dealing with the 5 bigger ones. But you could get a full listing of all of the items and work further down if you wish to. These items may or may not already be in excess, but we've got open replenishment orders that's going to take us into or further into excess to the tune of this value. So if we do nothing, this will knock on the warehouse door and go straight into this section. But you've got visibility to it. It means you can get with your supplier to see if you can cancel, delay, or reduce. And if you can, you've just improved the performance of your inventory. These ones should be in stock, but they're stocked out today. Now we take the amount of demand between now and the next delivery, multiply it by the inventory cost to give us like a projected loss of cost of sales. And again, we can see our total problem. Let's make sure we're dealing with the 5 bigger ones, right? But we can go lower. These ones, there is stock on the shelf, but it's going to run out between now and the next delivery. So a potential stock out. Same calculation to scale this problem, but what these are doing is they're driving your expedite supply process. And if you're able to do that on these ones, such that your customers don't feel a thing, well, isn't that a great benefit? That's all I'm going to look at on this webinar in terms of the dashboard. But this is quite a new user interface, and this is new on it, but it did replace something else that we think is very important. We call that data quality. So there's about 50 challenges to the data that we're receiving from NetSuite. And we show what those are. So for example, if you've got items with no lead time set, we would see that in this stock data listing, but it's not present. Means every item's got a lead time, but there is 121 item location records where there's no default supplier assigned. We can get a listing, we can pump that listing out to a spreadsheet, use the spreadsheet to gather the missing master data to populate into NetSuite. Because what we don't want is trash in, trash out of the planning calculation based on poor master data. So that's the dashboard. You know, those are the things that need attending to today. How do we work out what needs to be replenished today and over time? So we need to look at an item just to work through that. So this is an item in this particular location. If it lives in any other warehouse, we can see that here together with the demand for the item in that location. We can see the available stock, what's on order, dashboard status, navigate to the item in a different location, but we'll stay in here. So we're in the central store. Over here is some static data that we're either receiving from NetSuite or we're populating. Not going to go through it in any detail. These are item groupings like item attributes, and you can bring as many in as you like into NetStock to slice and dice your product range. Over here, is our demand tile. If we open that up, that's the last 12 months of sales history in stocking units of measure in that top row. The next row is the next 12 months of forecast, again, which might be statistical, or in stocking units of measure, which might be statistical, or somebody may have made an amendment to it. The distribution forecast, that's the demand for this item on this location to replenish those other warehouses downstream. And obviously the demand for this item is the sum of those two demand streams. We can make amendments to the forecasts. We do that on the forecast tab. You can see all of the sales history, both in the table and graphically. You can make amendments to it. These months have already been amended. So there's some efficient ways of doing it for multiple months, or you can key it. I'm not going to do that in this webinar, but you can make amendments to the forecast. And if you've done so, you would then apply it and the forecast would be updated. One other best practice thing when amending forecast is just to trap the business rationale why. So it's visible looking backwards and visible to other users in the application. So that's forecasting. So where all the clever stuff gets pulled together is down here. We looked at some of these settings on those two items for the depth of the snow, but just whipping through them. So the desired service level, either from the matrix or with an override. This is the lead time of the product, the calculation of the safety stock, and we replenish this every 30 days. Now you can take control of all of these elements in NetStock, but what it's basically doing is establishing some time fences that we then turn into quantities up here. So we look first of all at the lead time, and the demand in the lead time will be some ongoing sales forecast. Could be some firm sales orders yet to allocate that we're receiving from NetSuite, and we apply forecast consumption to that part of the calculation, and it could be the need to replenish other locations as well. But the total demand in my lead time is 18,428. We then look at the safety stock period, days 41 through 59, and there's a further 9248 demand in that period. Your lead time and safety stock added together is your classic reorder point. You then look at the replenishment cycle. What's a month's worth of demand from day 60 through 89 in this case? And there's a further 13,820 demand in that period. We add that to the reorder point to give us our order up to quantity or our max. So that is the min, reorder point, and max right now. Not only do we recalculate that every time we refresh the engine, but if you make forecast amendments, this all dynamically recalculates. So you've always got in NetStock your appropriate min-max levels to deliver on your desired service level to your customer, and factoring in the inventory risk on this particular item. We know the stock on hand. We subtract any past due sales orders because this calculation is forward-looking. That gives us an available stock. We add in any open purchase orders, manufacturing orders, transfer orders, depending on the supply method for the item. We add that to the available stock to give us a net stock position. And if the net stock is less than the reorder point, there's a recommended order factoring in any item MOQs, any item multiples to take us up to the max. So on this item, I can see we need 21,500 today. And I can see how it's all calculated very visibly too. Not only can I see what I need today, but that gray band through the graph there, that's the variable min-max quantity over time. Variable because there's some seasonality in the future demand for this item. Or to think about it more powerfully, we ramp up inventory ahead of high periods of demand and down in low periods of demand. And those red bars there, that is what we need to either purchase, manufacture, or transfer to this another location, depending on the supply method. And I can even see that in this little table there. So for a purchased item, there's your procurement forecast right there. If it's manufactured, there's the production plan right there. If it's a distributed item, there's the distribution plan right there. Now, I don't know if there's any manufacturers amongst you, but we do, if there is, or kitters or anything like that. This item happens to be a manufactured item. There's its bill of materials. If we go to a component, we can now get to see that it's a component in all of these finished goods. We can see a little monthly summary, but the detail is in the background of the demand on this component and pegged to our finished goods. And then this is the total bill of material demand. If we look at the demand up here, if we also sold the component as like a spare part or something like that, if we moved it to another warehouse, there'd be another demand stream with distribution forecast in. But in this case, all of the demand is bill of material demand. This component has its own settings, and now we can see what we need to buy of this component and when to satisfy all of those finished goods plans. Great visibility, and of course these calculations take place whilst you're tucked up in bed asleep. So back on this slide here, the day in the life, we've just sort of looked at what needs to be replenished today and over time, and the dashboard is what needs attention today. Real day in the life, as I said, things like classification, policy parameters, pretty much once off and tweaking. This is how you're using NetStock every day. But how do we then transact that? So we do that in the order schedule. So I'm in the central store. This now is a list of all of my suppliers where at least one item needs to be ordered today, and we can see the number of items, we can see the quantity, value, volume if we've got data, weight if we've got data. Look forward days enables us to manage supplier shutdowns, Chinese New Year, for example, if you're buying from China, and fish into the future, grab the red bars, pull them forward, order them early to get through your supplier before they shut down. This happens to be what I need to manufacture today. I could change this to distribution centers, put it onto a receiving location. This is what I need to transfer from central store to small branch 1 today. So all of these come through in a similar format for you to be able to interface with them. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this particular supplier here. 12 items I need to order today. So let's create the order, still all in NetStock at this particular time, where now we get to see a lot of information all in one place on the 12 items that we need to order today. We get another chance to see the demand that's flowing into those min-max levels. We get to see, well, no, let's talk about this one. We can see, look, that there has been a bit of a downward trend in demand, but there's a real step change in that ongoing forecast. So I know I didn't make that amendment, but it looks a bit alarming to me. There's no comment on it to help as to whoever made the adjustment, like there is on that one. So it's just a bit of a backstop to have an internal discussion. Really, what's the rationale for this reduced demand? And we may find during that internal discussion that we have been overzealous. We can dive into the item, increase the forecast to where we're more comfortable again, apply it, and because it's dynamically recalculated, note that we now need, I don't know, 750 or whatever that new number is. You get a chance to see the same item elsewhere. You might be buying or manufacturing centrally, and you've got some excess somewhere else in your network to enable you to maybe reposition some excess rather than ordering or manufacturing fresh. You get a chance to see the ideal quantity and the influence an MOQ has on the decision. You know, and what some people do is they set MOQs around an optimal price break. If that's the case, add a comment. That's lucky, look, 400 is a price break. If I buy 400, I get them £2 cheaper, it should say, right? But in this case, with that visibility, I'm going to spend £2 more per each, but less in total. Just showing you that you can put lots of information all in the right place to make sure you're placing that perfect order time and time again. Now we keep a little tally of the recommended order. We can see what it's been amended to and the difference. And as I said, this is what needs to be ordered today. Doesn't include tomorrow or the next day, and we might not be ordering again from this supplier for a little while. But I can get to those items by clicking on Add and Top Up. So these 4 items today are above my reorder point but below my max, and the top up quantity takes us back up to today's max, against which we apply any minimum order quantities, multiples. So we can simply add on these top up items en masse, or we can use this little engine down here to right size the total order. This is a supplier comment, so you can populate into NetStock any whole order constraints, and the engine can solve based on units, value, volume, or weight. So let's say up here it says 780 fills a container, so we can set our target, click on solve, where we now select a combination of top-up items that it takes us as close to but not exceed that target. So now I'm happy, I'm shipping less air. I'm going to add those 2 top-up items to my order. But I can still see against that 780, I've still got a bit of space. I could go into my A-class items. I could over-order a little bit until I fully utilize all of that space. And I've set a big target. I know this is a lot bigger than a container. It's just that the data is very large in this particular supplier, but it gives you the idea of how you can come up with that perfect order. So now I'm happy now with this 14 item order. I'm going to click on download, where it will then hit the NetSuite API and create a purchase order straight into NetSuite. And that is what I wanted to show you in the application. And it takes us now into any questions on what you've seen? Open floor.
Thanks for that presentation, Dale. It was great. Just had a few questions in, so I'll start going through those. Anyone more, just put them in the chat provided, or just keep messaging me directly. So the first question we have is, can you go through the pricing model for the product, please?
Yes. So the way that we price, there's 2 elements to the pricing. There's a one-time activation fee covering the connection to NetSuite and all of our time helping you successfully on board. And that process is very structured. We do not scrimp or scrape because we want people to be successful and customers for life. And then there's the ability to pay for usage and support, either monthly with no long-term contract. And just imagine the power that puts you into. It means that we have to earn your subscription every month, right? You can, however, pay for that annually, in which case we thank you and give you a 1 month free if you're paying annually. And the way that we price, it's based on unlimited number of users, unlimited number of items, unlimited number of locations, unless you get above 1 million item location records, in which case there's bigger and bigger servers required and there's some on cost. But the way that we price is based on the inventory value that we're helping you optimize. So if you're a smaller business, this would cost less. If you're a bigger business, then this obviously is bigger value for you and costs more. I won't actually illustrate any prices. Anybody interested in having a more one-to-one basis, then we can get into that sort of detail should we go there. But it is very price disruptive in the inventory optimization application space, I can assure you.
Roger. Perfect. Is there data integrity built within the system?
Yeah, I mean, it being cloud-based, a lot of people are very nervous about the security of their data, and we take that very seriously. And just as an illustration to that, we're very close to completing a 3.5-year initiative to get ISO 27001 accredited. And we're, as I said, we're very, very close to that. So everything that we do, we take security very, very seriously. And we're soon to be accredited with certification as ISO 27001.
Next question we have is, how long is the typical implementation?
For such a change agent project, it is pretty swift. So obviously the implementation is driven by the customer's ability to go through the data refining and education steps, but we found that typically from payment to live is 6 to 8 weeks. But you know, if it takes 6 months to get all the data right in NetSuite, then obviously that will have an impact on that integration, the implementation timeline.
So the final question we have at the moment is, what is the difference between NetStock and NetSuite's demand planning?
There's a number of things as I understand it, and maybe BrightBridge can put some more meat to those bones. But you know, we've got many more algorithms from a forecasting perspective. We've got that great visibility on the dashboard on what needs what needs attention. And I think one of the biggest things is that snow, being able to measure and appropriately manage the inventory risk for every item in every location. That distribution forecast as well, I have heard in the past that multi-echelon planning in NetSuite does not work properly. But I don't know if that's improved or otherwise since I heard it 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, just to shed a bit more light from my side on that one. With the what-if scenarios that NetStock have, that's something that NetSuite doesn't have as part of the demand planning. And it is those dashboards, really, as Dave alluded to as well, in terms of you have the color coding. It's far easier to see it in real time and actually be able to just say, okay, this is highlighted in red, so to speak. So it's normally just very data focused on the NetSuite side, and you have to then drill in and interrogate a lot more than the graphs and bits that are in NetStock. Are there any more questions? Okay, no more questions at this time. So thanks everyone for taking the time to attend our webinar.
Just a couple more slides, if I can, Ryan.
Of course.
So I wanted to just put up this quote from one of BrightBridge customers that is a customer of mine as well. So I think this really does show what we do and the visibility around what we do. And capture that very well. I'll leave you to read that for a couple of moments. So just in terms of next steps, so if anybody, if we piqued your interest to wish to do a full one-to-one demo, I've shown you very quickly, and I've not shown you all of the power. Then please reach out to BrightBridge to hook us up together, and I'd love to give you a more one-to-one demo. But I alluded to on the agenda, BrightBridge have twisted my arm. Okay, so for the first 2 NetStock customers who attend this webinar or you know, see the recording if you haven't managed to be on there. If we get 2, the first ones will receive a 50% reduction on the activation fee. So hurry up, guys. But that's the last piece from me. So Ryan, yeah, you can wrap up. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd love to have further conversations with anybody that is interested after seeing the webinar.
That's perfect. Thanks, Dave. And yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time to attend the webinar today. As I say, if you have any further questions, want to arrange this deep dive demonstration, please just email me at ryan.harris@brightbridgesolutions.com. We're taking a brief break from our webinars due to the summer holidays. So the next webinar with Jitterbit will be taking place in September. So this is going to be focused on connecting to NetSuite from other platforms. You will receive an invite in due course with the details once the date's been confirmed. There is, however, a customer roundtable on Suite Analytics on Wednesday next week at 10 o'clock. So I hope to see some of you there. Thanks again for attending today and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Cheers all.